This system has always been designed to destroy black boys from the very beginning of chattel slavery. Before 1811, 90% of Africans who were brought to this country were brought here. They were males. They were black males. And their spirit had to be broken so that they wouldn't rise up to become, an effective opposition to the powers that be. So they say it's easier to destroy the boy than kill the man. So you kill the man, you kill the boy before he becomes a man.
What up? What up? What up? Breakdown Friday. You already know what it is. I'm Joseph Ward, Patrick Irvin, Professor Carl Tone Jones. We back up in the building this Friday. You know how we do. We're gonna go ahead and jump right in. We ain't gonna waste no time because we know y'all ready for us to get this information going. Well, quick shout out to everybody who's still supporting this channel, everybody who's been watching the videos and commenting and everything. If I don't get to every comment, look, it's a lot going on. Try to get to as many as possible, but please keep commenting, keep liking the video, keep sharing the video and everything. And please help this channel continue to grow because the mission is 100K subs and we're working on it. So let's keep pushing. I need y'all help though. So today we're talking about how these school systems destroy black boys. We did a breakdown in the past. Pat and I did a breakdown in the past of Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. But this I feel is connected to that one. This will be a breakdown of Dr. Umar Johnson. When he is talking about how the school system negatively affects black boys, the plans and the overall outcomes that school systems are looking for, and how integration even affected that. So you know how we do. We're gonna get into this thing and get this breakdown going. So y'all pull your pen and pad out, get you some snacks, get some popcorn, whatever you need, some Skittles, healthy snacks, some carrot sticks, broccoli, whatever you need, some water, and let's do this thing. Y'all ready, fellas? I know they ready. I'm just asking them because I felt like let's do it.
Impacting, afflicting black boys, black men. So talk about that need, that imperative to focus exclusively on black boys, on black men for this particular project.
Well, as you know, I've gotten my start here in the city of Philadelphia as a certified school psychologist with the School District of Philadelphia, which I was for 5 years before I resigned. And the primary reason that I resigned is as the youngest at that time, I was the youngest black school psychologist for the School District of Philadelphia. My job often became being an advocate for black boys, both of whose teachers and parents believed that they had problems that could not be corrected without medication or special education. And I quickly saw how both special education and ADHD and the medication that comes along with it were being used as weapons of mass destruction, not just in Philadelphia, but across America's public and charter school system. And
So stop it right there. First point. I always think about my experience in school when talking about how the school systems negatively affect black boys. But I don't just think about my experience, but I think about the experience that I saw a lot of other black boys have, and how a lot of young black boys fell through the cracks and fell through the cracks early. And you know how you're a child, and you are seeing certain people advance and certain people not advance, certain people being held at certain positions, certain people not even coming back to school anymore. And you start to wonder what's going on. Back then, you really didn't have any real idea what's going on. Now, as adults and having all the information that we had, I've always hated school. I always thought that school was just a damn waste of time, to be honest. Like I thought, they send us there felt like 7, 8 hours a day, and we was really there wasting our time. But then listening to the information that he's giving and all the information that we've gathered over the years and what we know happens, especially the young black boys within the school system, I'm still flabbergasted at how many black people are still sending their kids, putting their kids in these school systems, and certain people are still in positions to where it's not the best position for them to maybe produce a child now, but they still do it. And so now you forced to put the child into this same school system that you hate. Because you all know, we see people that we know who preach the pro-blackness and the consciousness, and they hate the school system, this hate the school system, that, but that's the one that's raising their kids because they don't have the resources to put their kids, or they don't have the organization within their communities to put their kids in the school system that they need to put them into. And one of the greatest things about what Dr. Umar is articulating is we get to really see what the hell was really happening to black boys. We get to really see how the hell these schools, black and white teachers, were treating these black boys, but a lot of these white women teachers as well, but a lot of these black and white teachers, because I went to all black schools, and a lot of young black boys did not get the care they needed. They fell through the cracks, all these things. And now when he talk about the special education, he talking about all these medications and the things that you see that they putting these damn kids on. And then you wonder why these kids not really reaching their full potential. And but it's like a cycle, because the parents keep making these decisions that may not be the best decisions at the time to have these children. And then you got to put these kids in these system. And then once you put them in this system, you got these teachers and these people in the system who don't give a damn. And this shit just keep revolving. And it's like, well, if you don't like the system, at what point we going to do something different? Because I understand calling out the system and letting everybody know what's going on. But on the other hand, we got to have an alternative as well. We got to do something different about it too. So that's my first thought. I'm on one too, so I had to get a little bit of venting too. So, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Pat.
I think about it in terms of like, because I have my oldest son is autistic, and I work with kids, and one of the things we got to be honest about is, the school system is designed to educate a specific type of person in a specific type of way. And if your child is not that specific type of person,
that was me,
they're going to use the tools at their disposal to bring your child as much in compliance as they can, while simultaneously pushing them as far into the outskirts as they can to continue to work with the kids that are that type of person. And in a lot of cases, that means drugs. And I think one of the problems in the community that we have to deal with is the fact that a lot of people don't take responsibility for the education of their children. And they don't want to accept the blame really for having children, if we want to be honest about it. And so it becomes convenient for them to just say, oh, my child has ADHD, or they have, autism, or they have this, or they have that, and they need medication. You know what I'm saying? And it's one thing to acknowledge that your child has a certain condition. It's a whole other thing to get on board the medication train. And I think the medication then becomes the blame and the scapegoat for why your child isn't performing up to par, when the truth might just be that your child is not that particular type of person that the schools are designed to educate. And the reality of it is most boys are not.
Right, black boys especially.
We're hands-on learners. We learn by doing. We learn by a lot of us learn by in-depth conversation. To me, school was just too slow. I would read all of the textbooks that I got within 2 months of school starting. I would literally go home and read the textbooks and then spend the rest of the year digging in my nose, like not caring. I didn't care, and I had hard and fast rules. I was very disciplined about my rules. One rule was I don't do schoolwork at home. And I told you this story, Joe. I told my teachers that, like, look, first week of school, this started in middle school, 6th, 7th grade. First week of school, I don't do homework. What you mean you don't do homework? Someone would give homework that day to test me. I don't do homework and I don't do tests that don't count for the grade. And like that was my rule. It was stubborn, it was stupid, it was pig-headed, but I was very disciplined about my rules.
Yeah.
And they tried to medicate me and they tried to do a lot of other things to me. Luckily my parents weren't going for any of that. But I do see it a lot now working with kids. Anytime a kid is in an environment where we have to do lectures or something like that, where they just got to sit still for a prolonged period of time. If the kid can't do it, I've even heard parents mention, well, do you think medication should be? Do you think, like, I've heard parents bring it up. So, I think that's one of the things, without getting too far ahead of the clip, that we really gotta take stock of is, as a Black community, we gotta understand that the public school system is designed to teach a certain type of person in a certain type of way. And if our kids aren't that, we need to explore non-public, non-traditional means of educating our children, because they're out there and they're very easy to engage in.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a slightly different perspective. And I totally agree with both of you said in terms of the issues concerning the system and how it is not designed for our children. We're Black. There's no getting around that. And just like you said, Pat, we're tactile learners. Kinesthetic, if you will. We learn with our hands. We learn by doing. We learn by seeing it being done. We don't necessarily learn from being lectured to. Lectures are great once you sort of have command of the information, or command in terms of like the mechanics of the information. But until then, you need to learn the process, like teaching somebody how to work on a car by showing them instructions, or talking to them in the class. And then the first time they actually work on a car is the first time they actually see a real engine. You know what I'm saying? You don't learn it that way. We don't learn it that way. We're hands-on. But I want to go into something else too. This system has always been designed to destroy Black boys. From the very beginning of chattel slavery, before 1811, 90% of Africans who were brought to this country were brought here. They were males. They were Black males. And their spirit had to be broken so that they wouldn't rise up to become, an effective opposition to the powers that be. So, they say it's easier to destroy the boy than kill the man. So you kill the man, you kill the boy before he becomes a man. So spiritually speaking, they kill us. And when you see, you go historically through the different laws and policies put in place, like I said, the actual buck breaking that took place on plantations, the constant beratement, admonishment, disrespect. Even on plantations, Black males didn't even run the Black part of that plantation. It was always the big mammy, who was always in charge. You take that back to the classrooms and you see that, Black boys are loaded with sugar in the morning with cereals and things of that nature, and then told to sit still for the rest of the day in the classroom. It's been proven that Black children learn better when you have a cipher or a circular classroom, but yet and still the classrooms are lined, the desks are put in straight lines, which, by the way, when I found out why that happens, was very interesting. I'll tackle that later. So systemically, Black, we're put into this position, and you got to understand something. White feminism only exists to destroy Black men. I think we don't really look at it because we get caught up in the what they call revisionist history of feminism and how it's about women's suffrage. But women's suffrage, Susan B. Anthony, all these other people that started women's suffrage and those movements, They started those movements because black men had roles after the Civil War. Black men were able to step into spaces that white women weren't allowed to step into. Home ownership, the ability to vote, own businesses, things of that nature, the ability to hold public office. And so that was the real engine behind feminism. And then you look at the school systems. 91% of the teachers are white women. You think white women want your black son to compete with their white son? When white women are the champions of their white boys. And now let's take it back to the personal responsibility. I don't want to be too long-winded. Black people have, for the longest, submitted to white authority. And black people, being, as we always talked about it, what do we call it when you don't mature all the way?
Arrested development.
Huh?
Arrested development.
Arrested development. The arrested development of black people have us dealing with the system from the perspective of children. Don't want to be responsible for standing up and actually being accountable for the conditions in our community, even though it's not 100% our fault, but we're the only ones that are in position or have the will or need to have the will to do something about it. And then, the Milgram experiment. It speaks to the fact that when you have a people who look up to people in authority, that they respond in a very submissive way. That's what they did. The Milgram experiment was based on the Nuremberg trials that tried the Nazi war criminals, and they kept asking the soldiers, well, why did you do it if you knew it was wrong? They said, I was just following orders. And I think a lot of black people are in that perspective where they're just following orders and they don't believe in their own ability to lead their own people.
Yeah. The way we're going about continuing to operate is only to our detriment. Like you just say, like you said, 91% of teachers are white women.
Yeah.
We already talk about how we don't like the school systems. What we can articulate fully what we don't like. People can tell you all the issues that they've had, whether you are an educator or even the parents or the students. Hell, we've been through these school systems. Hell, I've come from Florida. We got some of the worst school systems in the country. We ain't really learned nothing, right? But this is the primary way that we are being educated. And so that's why I said what I said earlier is, okay, family planning is very important. Let's just be real. Let's not soft shoe shit. Let's just be straight real. Family planning is very important, right? And so on one hand, you don't like the schools. You wouldn't put your children in these schools. On the other hand, you're going to have a baby when you don't have the resources to put your child in the proper educational space that you want to. That don't make sense. It don't make sense. And don't be the person that say, well, people make mistakes. Busting nuts ain't mistakes. So let's not even go down that road. Just in case you tried to go down that road, let's not even go down that road. But what I am saying is we got to be more intentional and deliberate about making good decisions and good actions, especially if we're talking about being the best versions of ourselves, improving things here in Black America, improving things within our own houses and our own lives. The actions that we take as individuals have to be better because you can see how they affect other people, especially your children. If you don't want your damn children in the system, don't put them in the system, but don't put yourself in a position to where you got to put your kids in this system, because the system don't give a shit about Black children, especially young Black boys.
And I'll even go into that a little more, Joe, because you spoke on something that's important. It's something I'm going to be talking about more so on social media. And it's this whole concept behind single parents and single mothers in particular. The bottom line is, as Black men, we have to start addressing these irresponsible brothers who are shooting up the club with women that they're meeting on one-night stands, women who are just there for fun and partying and all that other stuff, but women that, because this is the drag on the community. And It's not that I won't hold out. If anybody knows me, and you know I hold the sisters accountable, but as men, we have to be also responsible for where we plant our seeds and who, you know, and it's going to sound kind of eugenics, just like, but we got to be careful about who we're allowed to, you know, bring children into the future with if they're not responsible enough for shaping and molding them and looking out for protecting them. Because as men, we're the protectors of the community. That is our role, you know, our responsibility. We can't keep saying that the community's failing in certain aspects, but not take responsibility for the portion that we need to take responsibility for.
Yeah. So let's move forward.
So I saw how special ed became the catch-all. It became the scapegoat for family problems. It became the scapegoat for poor instruction. It became the scapegoat for underfunded schools. It became the scapegoat for poor and ill-prepared teachers. And so Black boys have often been blamed for things that have been done to them, as opposed to problems that they bring with them into the classroom. And so what I have learned is that America has a system for destroying Black males on purpose. It is not an accident, nor is it a byproduct of poverty. It's not a byproduct of single motherhood. It's not a byproduct of mass incarceration of Black fathers, nor is it a byproduct of athletic culture or hip-hop music. It is deliberate. And those steps are miseducation, special education, medical medication, juvenile incarceration, psychological alienation, and number 6, premature extermination. Almost every boy.
Stop right there. The fact that we talk about a school to prison pipeline. And let's just be real, when we talk about school to prison pipeline, even though we know every child that get caught up in that ain't Black, we know they talking about Black boys when they talk about school to prison pipeline. Let's just be real, because that's who it affects the most, young Black boys. And so what Umar was just articulating, going back to what Pat was saying about similar to what Pat was saying about the parents who were entertaining the idea of putting their children on medications. Now, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong. From my understanding, and I'm not gonna say this is true across the board, but some parents get checks for putting their kids in special ed or putting them on medications. Am I correct?
They don't necessarily get checks for putting their children in special education. They get checks for their children being labeled or diagnosed with a disability. And therefore, typically speaking, when they get those, that's through a psychiatrist. And when a psychiatrist places that designation on a child, that child then becomes eligible for Social Security or SSI. And so under that guise, a parent can get up to, you know, anywhere from $500 to $1,200, $1,300 a month, just based on the fact that that child is labeled with a disability. But with the labeling often comes the medication and the classification for schools. And a lot of times these suggestions for the children to get evaluated come from the school.
Gotcha. Right. But it's you're explaining the cycle though that some parents are involved in.
It's incentivized.
Right. And that has to be talked about as well, because if the parent gonna be involved in that, then it's not 100% on the damn schools, and the parent is being complicit in the further oppression and breaking down of these young Black boys.
Because I don't dispute anything that's been said. There is a deliberate posture that's taking place to keep Black people as socially, economically, the underclass, the underbelly of America. There's no disputing that. And the primary way you do that is you destroy the boys at a very young age. When there was a time, I'm not sure this still goes on, but there was a time where standardized testing, specifically children in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, was utilized to determine exactly how they were going to build prisons, where they were going to build prisons at, because they guesstimated by a certain age that these particular, based on how you performed on these tests, this is where the likelihood of sustaining middle class America came from. You really got to understand the dynamics about that, because when you put children or you put somebody in the prison isn't in your neighborhood. The prison is typically in a township that's dying economically, and you become the revenue generator for that particular county. So you then employ hundreds, if not thousands, of people with that prison. Those bodies in those prisons are counted in terms for political favors. So if you have 500 inmates in the prison, I'm just throwing a number out there, those 500 people are counted in terms of who gets to share collectively of council of congressmen, the congressmen and things of that nature, and districts are set up. So when you have that going on, but those people can't vote, you know what I'm saying? But resources are churned into those particular counties and so forth. You become an economic boom for those particular communities and so forth.
So let me real quick, man, because you said something, and so I'm trying to connect the dots. PC, you said so because you're in Pennsylvania, I'm in Florida, and so because here the prisons or even the juvenile detention centers are literally in the country. Like just ducked off in the country. But when you said in underdeveloped towns, most of the prisons around here are in the outlining country counties, because Tallahassee is the only real city around here, and all of the other prisons and the juvenile detention centers are off in the woods in these small counties. Is it similar up there?
We have a few prisons within the city line, but for the most part, most of the prisons that have been built, especially since this reinvigoration of building prisons, those prisons are built outside the city lines, and they're built close enough to the city where you have access to them, but far enough where you don't get any economic benefit from those prisons being built. And on top of that, we had a situation back in like 2013, and I did a video on it while I was talking to students in South Philadelphia High School. And the presentation was called Chestnut Checkers. No, thanks for the YouTube, I no longer have access to that. But in that presentation, I revealed that Philadelphia was asking the state of Pennsylvania, because the state actually supplies the money for the schools, and it was asking the state of Pennsylvania for $300 million. The state of Pennsylvania turned down the city for the renovations, improvements, and just the upkeep of the school district and to help out with their budget. But then they went and gave $400 million to build the same money, because the money comes from the same pot, to private investors who were going to build 4 prisons around the state of Pennsylvania. That just shows you the importance, and that just shows you the agenda, playing out in front of you. And I've heard other people mention it, and they even mentioned that stat after I said it. Zaza Ali spoke about that same particular stat in Hidden Colors. Now, Zaza, you and I both know where you got it from, but that's neither here nor there. But that just goes to show you the intentionality and how blatant it is for the obstruction to take place for Black children to thrive in these particular environments that don't benefit them. None of the teachers that teach our children live in the neighborhoods that they teach in. And in particular, like I said before, 91% of the teachers are white women who have always harbored ill feelings towards Black men and Black males. And you can see it when they're teaching and talking to Black boys. And they're the main ones who are expelling our children. They're the main ones sending them to the office, to the point where it gets to the point where they become a so-called behavioral nuisance within those environments, that this conversation we're talking about now even comes to the table.
It's crazy. And you want anything you want to add to that, Pat? Because I was just gonna say something real quick before we go on.
Yeah, I just want to define terms. For me, and I think PC made a really powerful point about the use of the census. A lot of Black people don't really fuck with the census.
Right. Right.
I disagree, but I understand why, and that's personal preference. I'm not going to lecture anybody about why it's important to be involved in the census or anything like that. But one of the things that we do need to take stock of is the fact that prisoners. California, I think, is the only state, might be wrong, but I believe it's the only state that has a law against counting prisoners as population of that state for the purposes of a census. But to my knowledge as well, they still haven't changed the way the census is conducted to account for that law. So, and I believe that law was in the books in 2010, I think, when I first heard about it. And they had just done the 2010 census, and they still counted prisoners as constituents of the county that they were imprisoned in. And there was this big hoorah about how that was illegal in the state. But the census is a big deal because, like PC said, it determines the makeup of Congress.
Mhm.
And so you got to think from that standpoint, there's this ongoing argument about how rural locations have an oversized impact in Congress. And then we think about, well, one of the drivers of that is rural locations also tend to be where prisons are located.
Right.
And remember, these rural locations, the educational systems are usually poor. It's a correlation. These black boys getting fucked over in these schools, not learning anything, and unfortunate circumstances happen. A good percentage of them end up in these prisons. That school to prison pipeline is real.
Right. And we could spend that, the school to prison pipeline is a whole show in itself, talking about that and the impact of it. And it's because it's a lot deeper than black men being incarcerated. It's like PC said, they're economic drivers, they're political drivers, they're literally shaping the government from inside a cell with no voice. And that's a deep message to send. The other thing is I just wanted to say, like, and I gotta be technical, Ted, in terms of the term deliberate, because I feel like people will take. I don't feel like it. I know because I've seen it happen. People will take that, go into their schools, and cuss their kids' teacher out. Deliberate doesn't necessarily mean that everybody involved in the process has a very concise and thorough understanding of what's happening. That's not what that means. The system was designed to work a certain way deliberately, and that's what it's doing. So you going up and cursing out your son's fourth grade teacher doesn't help matters any. If anything, it helps the system continue doing what it's doing. Because now we can label this child, and then we can say they got there like that because their parents are like this, and that's a whole other bag of worms. But I just, like, let's understand what these terms mean when we start hearing them and throwing them around. The system was deliberately designed to do what it's doing. That does not mean that everybody involved in the system here. White supremacy was deliberately designed to keep white people in a position of power and black people in a position of inferiority. I hate to break it to a lot of people in the pro-black community. You guys participate in that system thoroughly, but you don't agree with the outcome, but you still participate. So yeah, again, like
the same as that parent who want to cuss out the teacher. You participating in the system.
Yeah.
I just want to, like, we got to be deliberate with terms.
But that's why the personalities line up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do what you don't stop doing that. Do what you do. Let's move on.
That I know who is at odds with the school system or at odds with the criminal justice system, he's at one of those 6 stages of the psychoacademic holocaust.
And that destruction of black boys or black men is just as deliberate. It's just as well designed as as Chancellor Williams titled it, that destruction of black civilization overall. It starts with the destruction.
Hold up, Joe. I forgot something else because I got caught up listening to PC. And it just clicked back when he said what he said.
Which part?
When as soon as Umar started talking, I remember because it was a bit of a one of the things I disagree with what Umar said previously, though, is that he said he was saying that it's not a byproduct of all of those other things, and I do disagree with that. I think the outcomes we're seeing now are a byproduct of everything else that's going into it. And single mother-led households is one of those things. Incarceration, like all of these other things roll up into that. I don't think that you can divorce the education outcomes from everything else that's happening in the community. So that's all I wanted to say.
Can I add something to that too?
Go ahead.
Because when you talk about the expansion that Pat broke down about how much bigger this is than just the prison and school pipeline, the school to prison pipelines, which is very real. This goes back this goes back to the antebellum era. So the Civil War, with the Missouri Compromise, with the expansion of building states and the Western expansion, right? This goes back to the Dred Scott decision, which I can't recall the judge's name, but he spoke about Dred Scott, but he mostly added in his statement, he spoke to the fact that it was manifested destiny that should allow states to expand westward, and because the whole concept behind manifested destiny and building the creation of states and things of that nature was to make sure that there was balance between Congress and the Senate seats. And one of the ways they allowed for the balance to take place was this industrialized way of building prisons, which really took heed after 1865. So this is more so about, making sure that white supremacist concepts and politics will stay in place, and they would be able to maintain a place of power in the decision-making aspects, and as well as the resources that came to those places, which put them above urban areas where Black people begin to go to, specifically when you talk about the upward social migration that happened after Jim Crow, happened during the Jim Crow era. So where Black people started populating these urban settings. You really only have concentrations of Black people in 10 or 12 cities around the country. In high mass. The rest of the country is still rural or suburban and is mostly white.
Yeah, I talked about that in the book actually as being one of the barriers that Black men and women have to finding each other is how dispersed we are. And being concentrated in the areas we're concentrated, but that's a whole nother conversation. But one of the reasons
I'm trying. What book is he talking about, Joe?
Talking about the chasm.
Yeah, the chasm.
This will be the one time when I ain't got it close to me.
Right.
No, but I do. So this is the reason why I said I disagree with what Umar said. It wasn't just to say that I disagree. It was because when someone says it's not a byproduct of all these things, it's a direct byproduct of the school system, then that implies that if we fix the educational mechanics that we use in the community,
then
we'll fix this problem.
Right.
And that's not true. And that's why I said I disagree. If we fix the way we educate our children, yes, things will get better, but we will still have a lot of the problems that we're having nowadays because everything works together to keep us where we are.
Well, case in point, and he might at some point where he talked about integration. So there was a time when Black people could only be educated by Black people. So the type of education Black people were getting was definitely totally different from what we're getting now. But all of the other social ills, not to the detriment of what they are today, but all the social ills that still affected them at that day still affected them. So that's another, point where support for what you're saying. Fixing the schools, yes, that's a priority, but all the other factors are still going to be there. And so that'll just be one bowling pin that's been knocked down. So now we can go to the next. So I got you.
Construction of Black men. And I'm real curious, like we talk a lot about what the state of Black boys is right now. I don't think we get deeper into that discussion. So we talked about like how the climate, how the environment is designed against Black male success or Black male progress. What's the state of that in your mind when you look at the state, the current condition of black boys, how bad is it? Especially, in the sense that this is why we need something like this school.
We are in, black men in general and black boys in particular are probably in the worst shape and the worst state we've been in since the Jim Crow era. And black boys, as public and charter school children, are in the worst state and in the worst shape they've been in since school desegregation in 1954. And let us be clear, most of the ills that impact black boys would not exist had we never forced the schools to desegregate. Special ed may have never been created had the schools not desegregated. ADHD, conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, the mass drugging of black boys in public school with the Ritalin, the Adderall, the Concerta, the Metadate, the Cyclert. Many of these things would not even be happening if we didn't force white teachers to teach black children or force white children to sit next to black children. A lot of this is the outgrowth and the side effect of the invasion of white public and charter school systems by black children.
I was just because it was like right there. Go ahead.
Is that the last bit of the clip?
Yeah.
All right. I disagree with all of that.
Elaborate.
Personally, I think black children are in the worst shape that they've been in ever. I'm not even going to say we were better off. I'm not going to say we were better off when we were, because he said this is the worst state that they've been in. And I know this clip is
since the Jim Crow era.
Yeah, but that implies that we were in better shape. We were in a better shape or a better state in the Jim Crow or prior to the Jim Crow era or whatever the case might be. I think this is the worst shape that we've been in ever. One of the things that we like to do, and I was just reading a book about this, is nowadays, and it's also a strike against all the other arguments. Nowadays, when we talk about the way black people were educated prior to Brown versus Board, we talk about it as if black students were just getting just the most horrible, god-awful education
yes
ever.
Yes, let's speak on this. Yes, because I was alluding to it, but let's go.
And the fact of the matter is, some of the most significant gains that the black community made educationally were made during those years where we were desegregated.
And we had to teach each other.
Right. The literacy rate exploded during those time periods when black people were meeting together in shacks with adults that were only high school educated. And they could only meet for 2 or 3 hours a day in a barn that was not properly set up for schooling.
Caveat.
Go ahead.
That a lot of those high school educated, they would also had their teacher certifications.
Well, even to that, let's not forget that having your high school education in the 1910, that's a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
It's not like today where, if you ain't got your high school diploma, people look at you like you're a overgrown 12-year-old. Like, like you was like, that would be the equivalent of having a master's degree nowadays. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was big stuff.
And that's what I'm saying, though. But if people don't get it, do your research. Stories, plenty of stories here on this channel.
Yeah,
especially a lot of the women. A lot of the women graduated from high school, but they were in programs in high school that was specifically teaching them how to be teachers. So when they graduated with their actual teaching certifications. So there's a caveat when you talk about high schoolers, people with high school.
That's why I put the bunny ears around.
Right. But I want to just fill it in.
Okay,
I want to fill it in so people know I'm your support with this.
Yeah,
so they get the picture is these women were literally trained to be teachers when they graduated. So yes, they had their high school education, but it was, like you said, the equivalent to a college education, and they were certified. So put that piece.
Go ahead, PC.
Now I was just going to throw in the, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who was widely considered the father of Black history, went back to school at the age of 20. He went back to high school. He went to high school, Frederick Douglass High School, at the age of 20.
He did.
Just to get his high school diploma. You know what I'm saying? People were fighting to get their high school diploma. If education to Black people at that particular time was the forbidden fruit. And even if we want to talk about, just based on, if you want to score it based on literacy, Black people were able to overcome the literacy gap and surpass any other community in this country from 1865 to 1900. You know what I'm saying? Where the majority of the Black community became educated faster than any other clip of any other community in this country. And actually, that was the reason for the Homestead Act. That was the reason for the whole the plea to the to bring more foreigners here and to bring me a hungry, you're tired, your huddled masses yearn to be free, because they needed craftsmen to deal with the fact that you had this explosion of skilled Black workers at that particular time, and it was based on mostly like the craftsmanship for the males, but also the educational aspect that the women were put through. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Well, in that time period was also one of the integral arguments that white supremacists used to use for the reinforcement and maintenance of the Black codes, and for the disenfranchisement of Black people. All of that stuff that we were building during the era of Reconstruction was built on the back of these Black people in these substandard spaces with these sub-qualified teachers educating themselves. All of that improvement was built on the back of that. So to me, I agree with integration. Well, assimilation started a long slide downward. For us in a lot of different ways. But look, let's be clear. And this is where we got to be honest. The driving force behind assimilation, because assimilation is Black people, or integration is Black people's revisionist history.
Yeah.
White people at the time were not like, the goal has always, and I've been saying this for damn near a decade or more now, and other people have been saying it longer than that. If you read white history books, the goal of white culture, the goal of any dominant society is always to assimilate, not to integrate. You want to assimilate the minority factions into your shit. You don't want to give them space to do their thing in your place. No, they need to become like you. So that's the goal of the civil rights movement, was not integration. It was assimilation. And that's why we assimilated, because we wanted to. All right. So that's first foremost. But let's also think about the mindset of somebody that wants to assimilate into a separate culture. We were already starting to idolize and look up to them. White ISIS culture is not a new concept.
Right.
So we were going to model our education system after theirs, and we were going to demand that our children model their behavior after theirs, which is why I say I disagree with all of that. Would it have happened as fast as it happened? No, I don't think it would have. But would we be on the track where we're trailing 20, 30 years behind white people? Yes, we would. So, we would just now be getting on the ADHD train, pumping our kids up with Ritalin and all these other drugs. We would just now really be talking about autism and all these other things, because white people would have still done it. They wouldn't have done it at the clip they did it at either. But I'm under no illusion of thinking, and I think that that's false advertisement for the condition of Black psychology, to think that if Black people had never allowed white people to shape the minds of our children, we wouldn't have. No, that ship sailed the moment Black adults allowed white adults to shape their minds. So that's kind of why I disagree with all that.
Yeah.
The Star Trek series speaks to that. Not the willingness, but it speaks to the Borg and how the Borg look to assimilate other societies or other people into their collective. And that's similar. That's the system-wide experience. So everybody else that rejected it, then you start to see their societies dissipate the Native Americans for the most part. There's some aspect you go to leave this country, you go to Tasmania, and you see, the rejection of white culture and what that did to the Tasmanians. I think a lot of black people became functioning from a defeatist mindset. If you can't beat them, then join them, and let's emulate them, and then let's seek to let them, because what I've often heard, and when you talk to people who were living at that time, and you hear the historical recounts of the era, a lot of them say, we just wanted to show them that we were people. We just wanted to show them that we were as good as they were. And so when you saw these black boom towns were small, microcosms of New York City, of Chicago, of Philadelphia, all these different. So when they built their town, they built it in the same likeness, even bragged about having the same things, and rejecting the historical culture. It was in stark contrast to it. So you didn't have, anything talking about, well, prior to America, we had these spiritual systems. Prior to America, we had these social operations. Nope. You go to those black townships, and this is why they were so unprepared to see that in them making these replica townships and making these replica school systems and things of that nature. They failed to see that they were setting themselves up to be murdered and slaughtered because they didn't prepare. They were preparing to be assimilated. They weren't prepared to be annihilated. Yeah. And that's why you saw a lot of them fail.
Yeah. They never were accounted for white people to reignite the terrorism. And that's what happened. But also, getting back to what you saying, something you said, Pat, earlier, you made a great point. If the black adults have assimilated into white culture, then the education that they give will be a part of that assimilation. And so, in saying that, it made me think about African-centered schools. And I'm wondering how much of a positive effect that did African-centered schools, because I'm thinking mainly about my brother, because before my brother went to elementary school, when he left preschool, my mom put him in African-centered school. So he was in that school for a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years before that school closed down. The school closed down before I was old enough to get there. But my brother's educational track was better than mine. And I believe that African-centered school, I always believe that African-centered school had a lot to do with that, because of the way they taught him, the way the education was given. So with that being said, posing the question to you all based off of, we know that the black people have assimilated in the white culture, and these are going to be the same people who are teaching the black children, and especially if it's still black owned, it's still going to have the white umbrella over it. So do you think African-centered schools would be able to reverse some of these things, or be a better version of the school, of the education, or African-centered education period will be better for the children to help kind of reverse some of the assimilation? Or do you think it's just assimilation with African clothes?
You want me to go first? I'll go first. I think it's a sophisticated process, because I do think that African-centered schools help with the esteem of children, specifically black boys. But we got to be careful too, because there's a lot of emasculation that takes place in those environments as well. It does serve the purpose, though, of a purpose of empowering them in their culture so that they don't feel less than. I think the bigger problem is that there's no African-centered culture outside of the school. And because there's no African-centered culture outside of the school, What I've seen is students and children that go to those particular schools, they come out real proud of their heritage. So they'll wear dashikis, they might wear ankhs, they might wear African trinkets and things of that nature. They might even have some sort of knowledge of self-confidence, but I don't see it where they are then going into the greater society feeling the need to sort of like to partner up with other members and create that African-centered culture. I see them just like everybody else, trying to get in where they fit in when they get out of those particular situations. It's kind of akin to watching, even Africans, when they come to America, a lot of Africans love to show off their culture, but they don't mind showing it off to white people, being amongst white people and feeling comfortable in the dominant society settings. I think that that we have to, if we want African-centered schools to succeed, then we need to have a more African-centered community for them to thrive in. Until then, it's good for the empowerment. It's good for keeping those children out of harm's way in a lot of places. But I still think that, it's not the final solution or not the solution we need in regards to keeping our children out of those places where they're going to be subjected to some sort of harm later on down the road. And there are not enough of them. And we don't believe in them anyway. And that's why they always fail and they're always dying, because we don't invest in the things we need, especially when the people we're investing in look like us. And then too many times the people that look like us turn out to be criminals. And that's not, I'm not saying that, in reference to Umar and his situation with the school. I'm just saying in general.
Yeah, I don't think, to be honest, I don't think you can start with the school by itself. And I don't even think you start with anything African centered, because we see what happened whenever something African centered meets up with European centered stuff. Mm-hmm. I think it goes back to the conversation we had before, and I agree with what PC said. Black people in America have got to figure out what that means to be a Black person in America on a cultural level. And then we've got to create a space for that to grow and develop. And then you create the school, because it does no good to create a school that's going to pump out these children. And then they get met up with cultural backlash when they get out here into society and have to get a job with a white institution. Now they're dealing with stuff that kids that grew up in white institutions don't have to deal with, which is the struggle to assimilate and find their white voice, if you will. And that could cause all kinds of other psychological problems. The fact of the matter, real schools and businesses have to work in tandem, and they need to grow together. And I honestly think you can grow the business first and then grow the school later. But growing the school first and then growing the means of economics out of the students to graduate from that, I don't know that that's possible behind enemy lines. If we were in our own culture somewhere else without all of the other stuff, we could probably build a black focused school that does stuff specifically catered to the way we learn and the way we this and the way we that, and then allow those students to graduate and create the systems that we need. That would be beneficial. But we live in America, and everything is a little bit more nuanced when you are living in the belly of the beast, because you got to figure out how to climb out the mouth of the beast without getting caught up in the stomach acid, the saliva, or the teeth. And that's a whole different process.
Yeah. No, but PC, you made a great point too about the environment, and Pat, you reinforced as well. But the African-centered environment. Once again, going back to my brother. If I put my brother in front of you now, you couldn't tell he went to an African-centered school at one point in his life. Now, because there was no reinforcement. There was no reinforcement at home. There's no reinforcement. Hey, we lived in environments where it was African nothing. It was crack, but no African nothing, right? And so, and not crack in the house, just in the communities and stuff. But just make that distinction. So. Right. But for it, like it makes sense though, the environment, because we're always talking about it, and that's one of the ways that I like to approach things when I'm doing community work is we call it wraparound, like the wraparound services.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the reinforcement, that education has to be reinforced within that community. And we talked about this before. And if there's no real reinforcement at home or within the community, then it's like taking a Band-Aid off and putting it back on every day when they go back to the school. And so it goes to the bigger picture of, like you were saying, Pat, how the community and the schools have to coexist. Because it's almost like what we talk about. One of the gripes we got with HBCUs.
I was gonna mention that, but I decided to lay off it for one show.
I graduated from the HBCU. I'm gonna talk about it. I don't care who cares, but it's a two-way street. The HBCU is not taking care of the community not taking care of the HBCUs. Look at Jackson State. They're in the spotlight right now. Look at Jackson State. All they dirt being put on blast right now. Well, you know, HBCU dirt is always put on blast, but it's put on blast even more. And a lot of that is their own doing. But the people who are complaining don't support.
Well, it's funny about.
Go ahead, BC. Go ahead. Well, okay. Well, so what's interesting is in the 90s, and again, it always goes back to this question for me of what's the outcome, right? In the 90s, during the Black golden era, golden age of Black community in America, we had a lot of Afrocentric schools popping up all over the country. Mm-hmm. So we know that the research is there. Those kids, like PC said, they grew up, they had a higher sense of self. They were very cultured. Self-esteem is good, everything. But the measuring stick was still how well did they integrate into typical American life. And in that, they did better.
That's the measuring
assimilating stick. Into white life than the other kids. So they were more likely to go to college. When they went to college, they were more likely to do well in college. They went to better colleges. You know, they and then when they graduated, they got better jobs. All of that's great, but it doesn't address the need of the community to have people that are going to build things for the community.
Yeah.
I don't think very many people looked at those schools. And as much as I love Amos Wilson and a lot of his work, he's guilty of doing that, saying that when you raise Black kids right, they're more successful, they're more educated, they're more this. But the measuring stick for a lot of his statements seem to be assimilation into white society, gathering resources and things of that nature. And I don't think that was his overall goal, because I'm a huge Dr. Wilson supporter. So you know, I don't want to believe that he missed it. He might have, but I'm just saying I don't want to believe it. But he made a lot of statements in a lot of his lectures and a lot of his books that pointed to whiteness being the bar. And if you raise your kids pro-Black, they'll meet this bar of whiteness, in which, you know, the question that you pose for me goes back to, well, what's the bar? Because if the bar is whiteness, then none of this shit matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that, you know, the funny part about that is, culturally speaking, I think you can accomplish, I won't say both things, but you can sort of like evolve your cultural, evolve with your culture to meet modern times. And what I mean by that is, you look at Japan and you look at the decimation that Japan went through in World War II, being the only country in the history of the world to have an atomic bomb dropped on them. And they had it done twice within, you know, a week of each other in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But what they did, that pretty much deflated them, and people pretty much thought that they would never be a world power again. But culturally speaking, they took the reparations from the NATO countries and they rebuilt their country. But the men in that particular country still maintained the samurai culture. So they move like samurais in three-piece suits. They move like samurais in board meetings, how they ran their corporation. They maintained their cultural integrity, but they were able to do it by transforming the modern times. And, you know, and so they no longer were shogun. They were shoguns, but they were shoguns as CEOs of corporations now, which helped them sort of propel and get back into the conversations in terms about global power. Now, we also can look at, the Jewish community. I know we're not supposed to say Jewish, but the Jewish community in a good light, right? One of the things I admire about the Jewish community is their emphasis on culture and their emphasis on reinvesting within their culture. So, a lot of Jewish children don't go to Jewish schools. They go to public schools or they go to private schools, very, very expensive private schools if they can afford them. But on Saturdays, they all go to worship. And in the process of going to worship within their temples, they reinforce their culture with their children. They re-educate their children. They say, this is what you learned in school, but this is what your culture is really about.
And they do that at home as well.
Every day. And in the process of that, they also bring in business people, business partners, and they meet collectively. And as they have their communion, they're sharing, they introduce new members to the community, to the conglomerate that's already there. And they talk about ways that they're going to help that business succeed because it's part of their collective now. And they reinforce this by investing in this. See, Black people want to be, we want to be scholars. We want to argue. We want to tell it from the mountain, but we don't want to do anything that comes with investing in our future. We don't want to do anything that challenges this beast that's at our fucking throats. We're in the belly of the beast. The motherfucker's growling, and the belly is growling, and we're scared of the growl. The growl shocks us back. We don't even try to climb out the belly anymore. We just try to make the belly more comfortable for our existence. And that is the biggest problem with everything going on. We're too fucking comfortable with how things are. No matter how corrupt. It's like being in prison and saying, I got everything I need right here. Motherfucker, you're in prison. Excuse my language. I ain't trying to get you demonetized. But motherfucker, you're in prison.
Say that.
Well, yeah. And we've seen those institutionalized people.
Yeah.
And the other great thing about the Japan analogy is there's a wonderful example of a culture adapting as well. Mm-hmm. Because the Japanese people did two things after the bombing of the bombings mm-hmm. that they would have never done prior to the bombings. One, they took reparations. This is a handout. You're talking about a very proud people. Prior to the bombings, I don't think they would have taken any sort of assistance or handouts from anybody because of the code of honor. Mm-hmm. And two, they became pacifists. Now, I don't think people understand how much of a turnaround that is. They became a military pacifist. And I had to put the military piece on there because they were still very aggressive in other ways. Mm-hmm. But militarily speaking, they became pacifists. And that is a super turnaround from what they were prior to. And I think that's a great example of a culture looking out at the world and saying, all right, we're not really in a line. What was working ain't really working no more. Mm-hmm. So let's come together and do something different. Mm-hmm. And they made the decision and they did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Another caveat. They were not behind enemy lines either.
True. Mm-hmm. That's the caveat to everything we say. That right there is.
So being that we are behind enemy lines for any type of progress that we want to make for ourselves, any type of elevation, empowerment, improving our situation in any kind of way, we have to really be thoughtful about how we go about planning this out and executing the plan. The strategy has to be something that can fight the assimilation, can fight the conditioning that Black people have received over the centuries, being that we're behind enemy lines.
Yeah. Well, Joe, let me say this real quick, and then I'm gonna be done. The behind the enemy lines narrative. This is what people have to understand, because a lot of people are gonna, the We Are the World, the Rainbow Coalition. I ain't talking about Jesse Jackson. This is what they have to understand. The society that we live in here in America is not one that's going to ever allow full assimilation. That's just not on the table. The Native Americans did about as much as a group of people could possibly do to become white, and they still ended up on reservations, right? You're
Read the
talking
book
about a group of
Prologue.
people that were nomads, hunter gatherers, all of this. That one of the last Indian leaders, I forget his name, he got his tribe, the Native Americans, I'm sorry, he got his group of people, his tribe of people, to stop maneuvering, to settle down, to start wearing white people clothes, to build buildings. Yeah, they went full on white, full white. Like that, like in the movie, the Tropic Thunder, he said never go full retard. They went full white, and they still ended up getting slaughtered. Like there is no example of a group of non-white people being able to be white enough to not be viewed as non-white. The Irish have that benefit because they're white. All of these other groups of people, the Italians, the blah blah, all of them, even the Jewish, even though I know that's a religion, but still they're white. So white people can at some point look at them and say you're white. I don't see all that other stuff. Your black ass, my black ass, that's never gonna happen. Even if you bleach your skin, you just gonna look like Michael Jackson. They still knew he was black. So that's why the behind the enemy lines rhetoric, it's like, regardless of how much you want to believe that white people are gonna love you, if you just assimilate hard enough, you can't assimilate this. And that's what they see.
Yeah, and it's weaponized. I mean that I'm always aware of counterintelligence. I'm always aware of COINTELPRO, the way it works and operates. So, I'm aware that we really do have to do this thing in small concentrated places, small numbers. And actually, it's something that the nuggets of it I'll never discuss on a platform like this, but it's things that can be done to eradicate the awkwardness or the losing aspect of our situation here. I know one of the things I'm doing, this is a shameless plug, but I'm doing the Brothers Building Brotherhood program here in Philadelphia in January 16th on Martin Luther King's birthday. And one of the purposes behind that is to consolidate some people, some brothers, in regards to being the foundational push of just some of the things we talked about here today. Being, I'm not going to get much more into it. If anybody's interested, reach out to Joe. Joe, reach out to me. But I think it's a very important step.
Send me the flyer and I'll post the flyer in the community.
It's also Joe's birthday.
Oh,
when January 14th. Yeah, that's my birthday, y'all. So y'all holler at your homeboy.
All right, I put the Cashapp sign up there, Joe.
Yeah. Cashapp Joe Ward 84. Cashapp Joe Ward 84. Link is in the description. Okay. Because I'm demonetized this month. So y'all, if you want to support me, that's one of the ways you can support me. But yeah, like all in all, no, because the overall title and overall theme was looking at how the school specifically affects Black boys, but we talking about how it affects. We also talked about how it affects Black children and the Black community, period. So talking about how it affects Black boys is a starting point for our conversation today. So but I'm glad that we were able to move the conversation to not just focus on Black boys, but focus on the Black girls that go to the school, but also the parents who send their children to the school and the communities that the children go back in after they leave the schools. All of this is connected and all of it matters because all of this helps to either push the kids further into the the preschool, the school to prison pipeline. They're either pushing them further into that or pulling them further away from it. But it depends on how we are operating as a community, how we're operating as a people. Understanding all the caveats, understanding all the factors, understanding everything that affects our situation and moving forward. Now, another caveat is us three who are speaking and those of us who are watching this also understanding that everybody don't know what's happening to us. All Black people don't understand what's going on. All Black people are not privy to this information, and they just out here. But for those of us who know better and are working to do better, damn it, let's take this information and use it and make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do. Because that's the whole purpose of these breakdowns, is to break this information down, make sure we understand it. Hell, hopefully not understand, you understand something too, so you can use this information. All right, now we know we got issues. The school's messing up our kids. What we gonna do about it? Joseph Ward, Professor Carl Tone Jones, Patrick Irvin, www.ontheshoulders1.com. Oh yeah, y'all check me out. Make sure you check me out on Mondays now. We finished reading The Chasm. So shout out, great book. People love the great book. So we're now reading Dr. Naeem Akbar's Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery. That's that book there is a heavy hitter.
God damn, Joe, how you gonna follow my book up with that?
Two good books.
You ain't right, man. You supposed to follow my book up with like Dr. Seuss or some shit.
I put a poll up and I asked the people what book it was between Dr. Amos Wilson's.
You didn't have Dr. Seuss in the list? You supposed to make me look deep.
Hey, well, I mean, hey, people like the book, so
I'm gonna have to write another book now.
There you go.
Y'all gonna help me.
Dr. Patrick. Hey, man. Hey. But shout out to the family. Thank y'all. Please continue to support this channel. We're coming off of monetization. Hopefully December 31st will come up. But if you want to support me, the links to support me, all the information is in the description. Share these videos. Share these videos with 10, 12, 13 people. Let's get this information out. Let's make sure people know about these breakdowns and know everything that we got going on. So once again, Joseph Ward, Professor Carl Tone Jones, Patrick Irvin, y'all holla at your homeboys. We out.